Today we are talking about the symptoms of a traumatized nervous system. So I want to go over 3 symptoms of a traumatized nervous system. But before we get into that, has anyone tried the hot cold showers? If yes, how do they feel? Do you want to share your feedback a little bit? Jeanette, if you tried, or Donna, if you tried, even if it was just one day, which is a huge success, and even if it was just 1 second, I would love to hear. And Jeanette, even if you wanted to share what you messaged me, that would be awesome. I don't want to share it for you, but what you were sharing about the Philippines would be, if you feel like sharing, would be great. Yeah, did either of you try it? Let me know. I did do it. And I made a more concerted effort to make sure I did it for the 7 days because we announced this challenge. And so Jeanette did it twice for 5 seconds max each. That's incredible. How did it feel? And did you breathe? Because the only thing is, my sense is that you maybe didn't breathe. Not that the time is wrong, but it hits you so hard that the goal is to breathe. So did you breathe when you did it, and how did you feel? 5 seconds is incredible. That's really, really good. You should be very proud of that. If you wanted to share. So I did do it, and then I found like some days I was like hesitant to do it, and some days, like I said on Saturday, it was just like, this is nothing. It was like total warrior mode. And so that chatter, I found that would trickle through the day, and I could transmute that chatter in the shower and not have it affect my day, because we do have different feelings throughout our day. Some days we're like super confident. Some days we are a bit more hesitant. And so that, that can be highlighted and brought forth in the shower so you can transmute it. And things that you would normally task yourself at work, maybe it was a bit more difficult because that day you're a bit more hesitant, but the cold water can bring it out and you can transmute it in the shower at that time. So there's some days it was like a nothing, and it was like, and some days I was a bit more hesitant. So that would carry on through the day. Like I said, the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. So Jeanette says it was so hard to breathe and count 1 Mississippi onwards. Yes, but you did 5 seconds, which is incredible. Like doing counting and breathing at the same time. Yeah, so you could even just, your breath could be 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi in, and then out. And then 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi in. So you can get that rhythm too and connect the two. So that's a good point. So you could try to slowly breathe, because the slower you breathe, the less impact of the fear of the cold. So if that makes sense, because the clenching up is what we do in life. We do when we're stressed in life, and it is what we're going to do when that cold hits too. So I did it twice as well. Donna says, I made a couple of seconds before panic mode kicked in. Amazing realization. That's really, really good. Did it deter you from wanting to try again? Or do you feel like this is something you could work towards? Because like I said, it is absolutely a mastery. The cold showers is nothing that you can just do. It's taken me years to get to like over a minute, like years. And as I said, when I first started it, I'd avoid bathing, like if possible. Like I would bathe like maybe at 10 p.m. and just like distract the whole day. Or I'd have to like convince myself like, okay, today I won't do it, just so I could get into the shower, because time is of the essence. You have a life, you have work, you have to get stuff done. And you need to shower daily for hygienic reasons, not necessarily wash your hair, but you have to shower daily. And I would avoid it at all costs. So I'd have to be like, okay, you don't have to do the cold shower today. And once I got in there, and I was like, no, I'm doing it. So, and I would give myself 1 day off a week to not do it. And then that day I was like, oh, why didn't I just do it? It's not that hard. So that's the trick too, because you give yourself a day off and then your mind's just like, oh, you should have done it. It's not that hard. But don't negotiate on the day either, because then it turns into, okay, I'll swap out my Tuesday for a Saturday, and then just keep it 1 day. Donna says something I can work towards, working on the mind chatter, which is a constant struggle. Yes, and it highlights it. Cold water will highlight it, absolutely. Mind chatter, that's primarily why I used it. I also wanted to, this is not why I brought it up in our last Facebook Live, but it really does help move lymph, and I wanted to include that too. But the real, true reason why I included cold showers was to get to that mind chatter, to chip away at it. And I do notice a difference. I did notice a difference. It wasn't the only thing. It wasn't the one-stop shop, but it made a big impact because really when any fear state hits, it highlights it for sure. That's what Donna's saying. Yeah. It really brings it to the surface. If you think about it, that is there all the time. Whether we're watching Netflix or whatever it is there all the time. And so it's just bringing it to the surface. And so when you get to a point where you can take it, and there's no story behind it, it's not like you need to be gentle or this, that, whatever. There's no story. The cold is the cold is the cold. You do it and you're out. There's no story attached to it. So again, we are in life story addicts, and that links to our Facebook Live too for today's topic. It really is a beautiful kind of segue between last Monday and this Monday, because all that chatter is usually linked because it's in our nervous system. So we'll talk about today's topic too. So it does segue and dovetail in quite beautifully. But today's topic is, I'm already 15 minutes in, it's supposed to be 20 minutes total. I don't know how this happens, but okay, so today's topic is 3 symptoms of a traumatized nervous system. And this is a very, applicable topic to myself because I actually did not realize that my nervous system was 100% traumatized. So Sippy is just logging on. Hey Sippy, welcome. We are talking about 3 symptoms of a traumatized nervous system. So this is not perhaps applicable to everyone, but it was quite a shock to me. And you know, a lot of people talk a lot of nonsense about social media and how it's just like garbage for your brain. However, there is a very conscious aspect and element to social media too. And I have to say, I have learned so much from social media. And being Instagram and who I follow, and sometimes even Facebook, but I would say more so Instagram, and just select people that I follow in the healthcare industry, specializing in trauma, specializing in conscious communication, specializing in wounding, inner child wounding, all that stuff that's under the soil. When you get to underneath what's under the symptoms, a lot of that's there. And so social media is very, to me, it has a very conscious side to it when used correctly. And I think part of why my healing was so difficult was because I didn't even know I was in a trauma mode. And it absolutely was trauma. So trauma, I always thought of like physical abuse, sexual abuse, you know, traumatized event like that happened in the family, perhaps, you know, breakdown of the nuclear family, not having and, you know, the set nuclear family, moving, you know, when you're quite young, or moving countries, even not knowing the language, being ostracized at school, bullied at school, all that stuff. You know, I can't say that I wasn't bullied a little bit at school, being the only Indian girl in my class and stuff like that when I was growing up. But that to me wasn't the trauma. The trauma was the asthma and the repeated asthma attacks and the stress that my parents endured because of the asthma attacks, which I also felt. So it just busted open my whole lens of what trauma is. And trauma is anything that the child perceives it to be, where the child has to disassociate from itself to not feel almost, and to endure the situation. Does that make sense? So it could be stress in the home. It could be immigrant parents, coming here, and you have children, but they're just trying to make ends meet, and they're doing their best in their point of view. Love is providing, but the child doesn't know that. The child needs attention, care, needs met, things like that, and sometimes a grandparent can do it. Often they can't, because the child doesn't know about money and like rent and mortgage, all that stuff. The child just needs to feel love and worthy of that love and safe, so it could be the household, it could be stress, it could be totally checked out parents because of stress, and moving, language barriers, abuse, like I said, of course, abuse, for sure, abuse, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, all of that abuse, but even the reaction of a parent to, an illness that the child has, like just whatever shock to the child, we don't know what it is, and we don't know what child is going to perceive what to be traumatic for them. But it was actually quite eye-opening to me that it wasn't just like the typical, not typical, but what you're taught, like sexual abuse or physical abuse, and it's far, far deeper than that, far more intricate. Perhaps a child is going through something and it mirrors what you went through, so your child is going through it, so it re-traumatizes, and then children can often mimic parents' wounds that are unhealed, so then the parent is further going into trauma because the child is going into it, and it's like this vicious cycle. So trauma is really anything that the child perceives that it's not safe, and they have to disassociate and learn coping mechanisms in their nervous system. So I feel like the nervous system is the way that we survive, and it's our antennae for the world, and once it's set, that's the lens of how we interpret the world. So if we interpret it to be, not wanted, not heard, that's what you'll see everywhere. If you interpret it that there's no space for you, you're not worthy of even taking up space or being seen, that's what you'll see everywhere. If it's interpreted as high stress adrenaline states all the time, that's what you'll see everywhere, and you'll have to create it in order to feel like home. So all of these things in our nervous system will be how we feel like home, how we feel safe. It doesn't mean healthy, it means what feels like home, which means what feels typical to our nervous system as we were growing up. Does that make sense? It doesn't mean that it's healthy, but it's what we kind of grew up in, and it's what our antenna is. And so then we'll see the world like this. So very often I have, for example, patients who are very highly attuned to their workforce and what men are perceived. So Donna's giving some likes, so she's in agreement. Okay, so it's making sense. So if, for example, some patients who are very highly attuned to their workplace being like a man culture, not nurturing of the females, not as much opportunity for the females. Females are given these types of jobs. Females are, not supported. There's a boys club, things like that. I'm not denying that that is not the reality. However, looking back at original childhood stuff and how the family hierarchy was set up and about how they felt about girls and boys, and then the child places their worth on this wound of being the feminine, and then is very angry at the masculine, and that's all she's going to see in the workplace. That is a traumatized nervous system. So she's only going to see that in the workplace. That's all that's going to be seen. And so there's a lot of anger and control to change it to be equal, when it very well may be equal, but that lens will not allow it to be seen, because that lens was imprinted on the nervous system as a child. And our work and anything that we do in our visits is to unwind this nervous system so it's at its original blueprint set state and not at that traumatized hypervigilance programming. So it's programmed. So it's like the nervous system is coded a certain way, and then all the information coming in is only interpreted by those codes. That this is how women are treated. Men are always, given a free ticket and they're so happy in their life, things like that. And so we have to champion for women and change the workplace, all that stuff. That is via the lens of that programmed nervous system. But at unraveled, like a baby that just comes into this world, there's none of that. There's none of that programming. There's none of the girl versus boy, male versus female, gender identified with this, whatever. There's none of that. There's no workplace fighting for that baby. That is an imprinted program and trauma of the nervous system, and disassociation at that deep, deep level from ourself. And then the pain is to try to correct it on the external world. Does that make sense? And so we go into that. And so there's many, many, many cases of it. For example, my case of asthma, it's taught to be a highly, highly stressed house, highly stressed, a lot of grief, and whether it's mine or cellular, whatever it was, but that is, held in the lungs. So it could be in a symptom, and it could be in just the way we live our lives. So the number one way that I did not realize that I had traumatized nervous system is, I'll talk about this one first, is hypervigilance. So the inability to stop in my life, I just couldn't. So I took it as being a high achiever and spinned my my inability to just sit and be as a point of worthiness because I work so hard, and this is a thing that should be celebrated, and it's something that is a great thing, and how could anyone think that there's something wrong with it? And look at how hard I work as compared to the other people. Whereas work ethic is great when it comes from that original blueprint and you're doing it from service and just being of service. But when it comes from the programmed nervous system of doing it out of lack of worthiness and not being able to stop because perhaps the stopping will bring up pain, that is a traumatized nervous system. So what happened during this pandemic, during the quarantine for people, is there's many, many of us who have traumatized nervous systems, and we medicate with having kids, with having packed schedules, with doing your work and then signing up for being on the strata council, doing your work, working a full-time job, and then taking extra learning to do more in work and advance in work, and taking on all of this and being superhuman in efforts to not feel is part of it, but it's not all of it, because I was good at sitting and stuff wouldn't really necessarily always pop up, but that need to create adrenaline and chaos was the only thing that felt normal to me. So the hypervigilance and then the always being jam-packed busy versus my brother, he was like, what is wrong with you? Always he would ask, what is wrong with you? He's like, Neetu, you need to be more Euro and less North American, meaning like he'll stop, he'll take his work breaks at a coffee shop and take his laptop there and do a little work there. He'll spend a lot of time at walks and looking at the water, things like that. So Carolyn is watching, welcome Carolyn. And for me, it was like, I can't even stop and breathe almost because there's just so much to do all the time. And that chaos of like jam packing my schedule, I wore it as a badge of honor, but it was because my nervous system was totally stuck in adrenaline and hypervigilant chaos mode. And even to the point where I'd be, you know, early to get someplace, but then all of a sudden it's like, thank you, Carolyn. How are you? I'd be almost early to get someplace, but then it'd be like, oh, maybe I should just like rearrange my pantry before I leave, and something would pop into my mind. Then I put myself into like 3 minutes late, and then the dash to get to that time-sensitive place is a mad dash, and it creates chaos. But that chaos is normal to my nervous system, and I almost create my life to create the chaos. So that is a symptom of a traumatized nervous system, is the hypervigilance of work, not being able to stop. You know, there's so many patients just like what I went through, and like it's like podcast after podcast, learning and learning and learning. Every free second is just jam-packed with learning, with filling it up with something, and there is times of like crash, but it doesn't necessarily bring up emotion. Sometimes it will. Sometimes we do the hypervigilance and the jamming pack the nervous system because it brings up stuff we are not ready to deal with. And other times I did a lot of inner work, and I dealt with a lot of inner stuff. So it wouldn't be that my stuff would boil up to the surface. It was just that my nervous system was programmed to be in that chaos, and also the deep wounding of self-worth was still there. And so the more I did, the more I was worthy. I had to earn my love in this world, earn my place in this world. So the more I did, the more chances that I could get love. So that is a traumatized nervous system. The need chaos to normalize. I think that's posed as a question. So the chaos I created and others create, it feels like home. So the nervous system to that child was in a chaotic state. So it's programmed that way. So it always needs to create the chaos in order to feel normal, because we don't even know what we're doing, but that chaos feels like home. And as I said before, it doesn't mean healthy. Healthy is a different story, but that chaos is created to feel normal, because that's what it feels like as a child. So we'll create it in our outside world all the time. Whether it's just jamming pack our schedule, not being able to stop, creating chaotic stuff, you know, like another thing is time is really a big thing for a traumatized nervous system. So you're en route to somebody's place and you're totally on time, but then you're like, let me just stop off and do all these other things in the middle because you think you had time, and then you don't, and then you get to that person's place and it's chaos because you're just like mad dashing it everywhere, and then that chaos feels normal. That is a traumatized nervous system. So can you be a high achiever? Yes. Can you be super, super driven in your career? Yes. But the goal is to unravel the nervous system so it's not in that hypervigilant state, that's not in that state that needs to create chaos. And then when you work, it is potent and it is pointed and there's boundaries to it. So it's not like 24/7 working, and it comes from this inspired place versus I can't stop place. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to everyone about the first symptom of a traumatized nervous system is not being able to stop, which is so very much why this quarantine was so hard on so many people, because they didn't realize their coping mechanisms and all the fear that came up. Yes, there was the virus fear, but so it makes sense. Carolyn's saying yes. So give me thumbs up or hearts if it makes sense. Yes, there was a bit of the virus fear for sure, but you're stuck at home, right? You're not leaving. What is coming up? That was already there. Just like we were talking about the cold shower, that chatter was already there. So you're at home, and now all your coping mechanisms of thinking that, you know, you're a good mom by shuttling your kids everywhere, making them all this stuff. So Sahani is saying, thanks for the great explanation. Okay, good. I'm glad this is making sense. So shuttling your kids everywhere, you know, going off from meeting to meeting, and then taking extra courses, and then being on Strata Council. All of that is stripped back now because of the pandemic, and you have to be at home. So yeah, let's negate the virus because you're stuck at home. All that fear coming up and those feelings were because the nervous system was traumatized early on. And like I said when I was starting off, trauma doesn't mean something horrifically bad. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It can be out of the best intention. Like, my parents had the best intention to like help me heal, but the fact of the matter was so dire that it resulted in a traumatized nervous system. You know, just the way even the doctors treated it at that time. Like, your parents couldn't come into the room. You go into the ER and they would take you. You didn't know where your parents were. For a 2-year-old who can't breathe, that's highly, highly traumatizing. So my mom said she did the shower every day for 30 seconds. That's amazing. That's awesome. So my mom did it too. That's awesome. Great job, Mom. So yes, that is the first step, first symptom that I'm talking about is the hypervigilant nervous system. And we can unravel that. So the pandemic actually helped me a lot to realize how much I created so much chaos even when the clinic was closed. And then boom, I had to stop. I had to and only recently have I really reprogrammed the chaos. And now when I do work, it's equal. I get as much done, if not more, but it's not out of the programming of this traumatized antennae nervous system. It's out of inspired work ethic. So that's symptom number 1. Symptom number 2 is gut issues. So having learned what I learn now is anyone who has major gut issues, whether it's Crohn's, colitis, major food sensitivities, anaphylactic reactions, all of that, trauma is really held in the gut, in the cells of the gut. So we often know that there's a traumatized nervous system when there's gut issues. So there's the vagus nerve that I've talked about in several other Facebook Lives, but it is called the wandering nerve and is a cranial nerve, I believe 10, cranial nerve 10. It innervates from the brain stem to the gut, and whatever we think, what stressors we have, it will imprint the gut. The wandering nerve, it innervates a lot. It innervates the uterus, it innervates the lungs, all of that. But so often when there's a traumatized nervous system, it is, the trauma is experienced maybe as stress in the head, but it is experienced in the gut. So there will be many gut issues. And yes, you have to heal the gut. Yes, you have to take away anaphylactic foods. You have to take away food sensitivities, whether it's, various other symptoms that are arising because of these foods that are eating. You have to take away inflammatory foods, all of that, processed foods, junk food, terrible fat foods. All of that has to be removed. But then what we're left with is healing the gut. And yes, you have to heal with probiotics. Maybe there was tons of antibiotics. You have to heal, put the probiotics back in, heal the gut lining, all of that. So then you're doing all the physical stuff and clearing all that up, healing the gut at the physical level. But underneath, how did the gut get that way is usually, in my opinion, trauma. A traumatized nervous system. So the enteric nervous system, the gut nervous system, is the biggest nervous system aside from the peripheral nervous system. The gut nervous system is the largest, and what we perceive as stress and traumas and what we feel in the outer world, if there wasn't a safe place for us as children to express it and express our thoughts on it and move that trauma out of our system, which of our parents had the tools to do that at the time? None of them really. It just wasn't done. Next generation, this generation's of parents, yes, it's a totally different story. It can be a totally different story. But at that time, it was trauma, stress, and then the child internalized it. And oftentimes, it will be stored in the gut. And so if there's gut issues, yes, we have to do due diligence and do all that healing and take away inflammatory foods, all that stuff. But then at the root is to really, really get at that trauma, heal that trauma, heal the vagus nerve, the imbalance in the vagus nerve that is overactive and really still running in a traumatized state of stress. So now it's not childhood trauma, but the nervous system is programmed. Every single stressor hits the gut. You have to write exams, hits the gut. You have to talk to your boss, hits the gut. You have to have a hard conversation with somebody, hits the gut. You don't want to have a hard conversation with anyone because it will hit your gut. So you avoid all those hard conversations. And that is also stressful too, because then you put yourself in all of these like boxed off situations, and all of that affects the gut. So does that make sense that trauma is very much held in the nervous system of the gut, and that's how we program the world? We're programmed to see the world is through that stress, and then it's like almost you cannot digest the outside world. You cannot digest what you're seeing in the world. You cannot digest what's going on. You can't stomach what's going on. So the little phrases that we say, it's not by accident. It's actually, we're speaking truth. We're speaking subconscious truth, whether we know it or not. It's hard to stomach what I'm watching. That is, a traumatized nervous system. And so everything will hit the gut really, really hard. And you'll know these people, they'll say often they're very calm and they don't really have stressors, but they can't figure out why their gut is so off. And it's not ready. It's not time for them to know. But as you peel, you will get to the root of it. And sometimes their life is very calm at this point, as an adult. It is externally very calm, but it doesn't make a difference if your internal stress is high. That is the difference. So the internal stress is programmed since childhood, and then you have to have everything on your outside world be kind of calm, otherwise it sets off your gut. So it's like making sure the whole external world is walking on eggshells because you can't have this gut set off. Whereas when the trauma in the gut is healed, so Jocelyn is just tuning in. Welcome, Jocelyn. So when the trauma in the gut is healed, you can have chaos around you in the home. Kids are being loud, music is whatever, and it won't impact your gut. So that's the difference, is when it's healed at an inside out level, you don't have to make your outside world so pristine, picture perfect, walking on eggshells to make sure that this is okay. Often what I'll notice too is as the gut trauma is healed, that the food sensitivities also shift. Even anaphylaxis will shift. So underneath all that food stuff, yes, you want to take it away for a while, but at the root of it is trauma. And when you heal that trauma, still do all your due diligence. Is it possible to put those inflammatory foods back in? Yes. Will it be at the same amount? Probably not. Will you have those foods? But you have to pick higher quality, like, real how that food is supposed to be intended. And can it be put back in? Yes, for sure. So that's the difference too. When the trauma of the gut is healing, is when you can put those things back in. And then the outside world doesn't have to be so meticulous to keep the inside. A perfect example of, I love Top Chef. That is one of my favorite TV shows, like love. And I just love the artistry. I love like how you can tell when a person's heart is closed. You can feel it in their food. And as the person evolves and they open their heart, the food is different. It's received different. And so it's just another way of transferring consciousness. So I think the way I treat is a huge transfer of my consciousness, and where my blocks are, it will be seen and felt in my practice. So I feel that for Top Chef too, like you can tell their critique is always something to do with their personal world, and as they shift that, the food is totally different. Like the girl who won, this is a total tangent, but this is Top Chef All-Stars, and she was on a previous season and got to the finals, and she's Chinese, and her parents her dad for sure did not approve of her being in the culinary field, did not approve of her being a chef, so she wanted to do it to prove to him that she was worthy of his love by getting it. She didn't win that season. Comes back for the All-Stars, heals her relationship with her father, doing it for herself this time, pure open heart, honoring to the nth degree of her Chinese culture in her food, and she had won most challenges in Top Chef history. So that is, it will reflect in every part of our life, every aspect of our life. But the point being is that I just read on social media today, so I follow Padma. She's one of the Top Chef judges and hosts, and she waited 3-4 days to post the winner, as do the other contestants. So Bravo, which hosts the TV show, they also waited just to, let people are busy. Some people are moms. They can't get to the TV recording right away. They don't want to do spoilers. So she waited 4 days now. And this one woman just went off like, thanks for spoiling it. I guess you don't care about moms. I didn't have time. I guess you're saying that your time is more valuable. And Padma's like, I'm sorry. Bravo posted the winner. So I thought I was in the clear to post it. And that's the epitome of the world having to tiptoe around her stuff. And so all these other moms are like, I'm a mom too. Why didn't you turn off social media until you watched it? Because you know it's going to be a spoiler. And so it's an inside thing. You take ownership, you take power, you take your worthiness and power back, and you do what you need to do and heal. And then the outside world doesn't have to tiptoe around you in order to feel good. So Padma didn't have to apologize, but she did. But she didn't have to hold back. Her job is social media. She has a huge following. That's her job. She didn't have to hold back because this one person couldn't get to the show on time, and now they found out the winner. So she was very upset. And then everyone was like, this is your responsibility to turn off social media. That is a perfect example of the outside world tiptoeing against our wounding or our stuff. So with the gut, once you heal the gut, transform, heal the physical layers, physiology, get to the trauma, the outside world doesn't have to tiptoe around what we can and cannot do. So many people tell me that they have gut issues. They know exactly where all the public bathrooms are in Richmond. They know exactly how far they need to get to it. That is something that needs to be worked on. Some of them, they have kids and they had to have very, very slow volume, low volume stuff in the home. The kids couldn't be too loud. And as they healed, the noise from the kids didn't bother her, So it's all about the inside, and we can't make the outside dampened to treat our inside. So definitely one symptom of a traumatized nervous system is the gut. The third one I wanted to talk about is just not feeling safe in your body, not feeling safe. It doesn't feel like home. So oftentimes what dissociation means is that a person will think all the time. They've popped out of their body because it's not safe to feel what they felt in that trauma state, and they live here. And you know how they live here because they want to control everything. It needs to be laid out. They need to know what's going on when, what changes happen. Everything needs to be, there can't be a flow of life because they have to know. And there's no living in the body. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of control. There's a lot of anxiety. That is a traumatized nervous system. And you can tell who doesn't live in their body. They hate thinking about living in their body because here you don't feel. Here you can just think your way out of everything and control and create scenarios to make sure that the control is there to keep you safe. Because in the body, you don't feel safe. So Jeanette is saying anxiety. Yes, that is definitely... it definitely can be a symptom of a traumatized nervous system. And that anxiety is there as a safety mechanism, believe it or not, to try to get you to feel safe. So because of not living in the body and feeling, living here, the anxiety is there as a form of control to create safety. And so often when there is no living in the body, there's adrenal issues. So when you link the esoteric with, and the energetic, is the root chakra is the lowest chakra, which allows us, when we're linked to our root chakra, we're grounded, we live in our body, we feel safe, we feel secure, and in physiology, our adrenals are not taxed. So when we live in our bodies, our adrenals are not going like cortisol crazy. But when we live in our head, our adrenals, when we live in our body, are in a good rhythm. There's no dips, there's no like blood sugar dips, there's no blood pressure dips, there's no fight or flight, there's no dysregulation of working out and feeling just totally exhausted, feeling totally stressed by just a simple situation, simple interaction at a cashier, whatever it is. But when we live here, everything's heightened because we're not in our body, we're in a disembodied, disconnected state, and everything's heightened, and it feels like everything's tenfold because you're not processing from the body, you're processing from here, and also disconnected from the body and trying to control everything from the mind. It can be as simple as like, again, with the quarantine state, I've had patients, just the grocery store, the policies will change day to day, and that can set them off because it was one thing one day, and then the next day it was something different, and so that control of, well, it was like this yesterday, and not following the flow of like, hey, we're not really sure what we're doing, we're just following guidelines as they're given to us, and then the patient goes with the flow, or the client goes with the customer goes with the flow. But when it was like, this is how it was yesterday, I need to know what the protocol is so I can feel safe, and then there's irritation and a bit of a freak out, that is because of the mind chatter and living in the head. So when you're living in the head and you're not in the body, that is a protective mechanism that usually the child will go through because living in the body was just too painful, there's too much emotions. And a lot of times this is where addiction comes from too, when there's just too much pain and stress, the child has to disassociate, and we in our society heavily judge addictions, but the addiction is just the medication for the disassociation. So we're disassociated from our bodies, and we're trying to medicate that pain of disassociating with addictions. We can also create symptoms from the disassociation. We can medicate with foods, with sugars, with being busy. All of that is to treat the disassociation. So we're not living in our bodies, and that is very, very characteristic of a traumatized nervous system, because in here you can create scenarios of control. You can have everything laid out, picture perfect to a T of your day, how it's gonna roll out, how everything's gonna, and then if one thing goes off, it like sets off. And so you could set it off with, even with a husband or a wife or a partner, like you have everything set up, but then they boom, surprise you with something that's not on your schedule, and it throws you totally off because the mind chatter needs control, it needs regularity, it needs to control everything to feel safe. So it's kind of perfectionistic, it's kind of control freak, but it's more to it. It's a disassociation, and that's the only way that the body can feel safe. So anxiety is a way to do that. Fear state is a way to do that, because when there's fear state, if I watch the news 4 times a day and I know everything about this virus, I'm in control, I am not going to get surprised, I'm not going to get blindsided, so I need to know as much as I can, versus being in your body and trusting what the body needs, who the body needs support from. Do I need to go see Brio just to get some extra support? Do I trust that my immune system has been worked on for 6 years prior to this virus, and that we're at a pretty good state immune health wise? Do I feel like I have been exposed to millions of viruses and bacteria, and I'm of an age that with no predisposition to other diseases, and I can feel that my immune system feels strong? Do I have to avoid so and so? When you're in your body, you can feel what to do and how to flow, and you take still necessary precautions, but when you're in the head, it has to come from control and what you hear and what you read and what everyone tells you, and just gaining knowledge. There's no intuition, there's no deeper feeling. So it's a very, very, like, the mind can't stop, because it's always trying to keep you safe. So that fear and anxiety and not living in the body. You can feel the patient slowly start to move into their body as they get treated over and over and over again over the years, but it's very clear when they're just locked here. Like, you feel nothing here down. It's fascinating. That was totally my journey, and I see it in most patients too. Even when you're talking to them, they're not listening. They can't listen because they're thinking about their next thing to tell you. So they can't even receive the feedback of how you're trying to help them, because you're just thinking of the next thing, versus like, you're sharing with them what you see, they're breathing it in, they're feeling like, yeah, I totally feel that's correct, I don't feel that's correct, and you can have a dialogue about it versus I can't wait to speak again and tell them the thing that I forgot to tell them. Does that make sense to everyone? So that is part of it. So there's many more symptoms of a traumatized nervous system, but those are 3 that really, really kind of stand out to me. I've experienced them and I see them all the time. So I'm seeing some thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up if that makes sense. If that's clear to everyone. So Donna's throwing some thumbs up. Great. I know that Donna understands for sure. Yeah, there has to be a lot of like adrenal treatment when your nervous system is totally taxed and you're not living in your body. There has to be like routines, this, that, whatever. But as you start to live in your body, it's a totally different feeling. And you can feel when somebody is embodied. You can feel it. It feels totally different. Like they're like this grounded force. Versus somebody from their head is like, they can be big in stature, but they're stuck here. It's very like airy. It feels stressy. You can feel it. It's very different. So I did see some likes that made sense. I see more likes. Is there any questions that I can clarify about this or even the hot cold shower? Because it goes in line with it. So how we can tell where we're at in our body or our heads is the hot cold shower brings it to the surface. Like, where are you? Do you put a story on it? Do you put a chatter on it, or do you just do it? There's a difference. Is it cold? Yes. Do you love doing it? No. But is there a whole story to it? And I also tagged on our last post a TED Talk too that was talking about the fear, and that's being brought up with hot cold showers too. So take a look at that too. But does this make sense? Does anyone have any questions, any comments, statements about a traumatized nervous system? And yes, this can absolutely be worked on. That is the root of healing, is to have a ironclad nervous system. Really, because the nervous system is our protection mechanism. It doesn't know that we are no longer 2 years old or in the womb or birth, whatever it is. It's always trying to protect us. That's its job. And it's like, come hell or high water, I will protect you. But there's a point where we don't need that protection anymore and we have to do it differently. But the nervous system doesn't know that we've aged. I wanted to ask if I should try the hot cold showers with my palpitations that I get at times. This is a good question. You have to be careful with hot cold showers because it can affect your blood pressure, especially that hot to cold jump. And if you get heart palpitations regularly or vertigo or heart issues, I wouldn't recommend it unless you are under the care of a doctor. But if you get them very irregularly, I say sure, try it, but just do it very, very slow. And when you do your normal shower and you get your hot jump, don't make it so hot that you're like lightheaded. Just have a bit of a hotter temperature and then drop to cold and just do it for a few seconds. And if you feel unshaky, even just put like a waterproof stool in the shower and you can sit on that and do it, or sit on the shower floor and do it, just to make sure that you don't fall or anything. But just be very careful. And like some of the other ladies who posted, just do like 5 seconds, 3 seconds, just to see how you are. And keep breathing. So if you're doing it and you're not breathing, make sure you get the breathing first and just be in the shower and learn to breathe. Do that deep breathing and get that down first, and then try to switch to the shower and just do a few seconds. So if your palpitations are just once in a while, for sure I would try it. If that helps. Just follow how you feel. If that hot to cold jump is making you dizzy, it's not the right time. Any other questions comments that I can quickly touch upon before we close up for today? So that's some great feedback, you guys, great sharing. I always love the comments, as I mentioned, for my Facebook Lives. It's my favorite part. And yeah, learning about trauma has been a total game changer for me. It's not that I view every patient as the lens of trauma now, but it makes sense when you do somebody's health history. You keep little mental notes of like, oh, okay, so you had this as a kid, but now your symptoms are this. So It's always very, very helpful to learn things. And like me, you could have zero clue that there's trauma, like zero clue up until years after treating. So it's helpful to know that somebody knows. And is our treatment like the be-all end-all of trauma? No, sometimes you do need extra help to help you through the trauma as it unfolds, you know, as you get through the symptoms, and then, you know, that part might need more care. And so a trauma-based therapist would be a great idea. Someone who does, you know, PTSD, someone who does somatic body work, anything like that. They can help you move that trauma through your system. It's not just, you know, perhaps with us, you're doing the healing, but then you might need to tag on someone who's very well versed in trauma. So Donna says, thanks, great info. I love it. I'm glad that it landed for some of you. Yeah, it's a tough one. Not everyone can get it. I need to make an appointment. Thank you for this. I've always associated the word trauma with such weight. Yes. That is exactly it. I also associated trauma with such weight too. Like, oh, that's not me. That's left for somebody who really needs it. But don't dismiss what we went through as not being traumatic. It is to the person, and yes, it is traumatic, and maybe not as on the same spectrum as somebody else who's been through horrific things, but somebody could go through horrific things and not disassociate from their body and have the full support of their family, and it wouldn't impact them as somebody who went through something, you know, of a different nature of trauma, and there's no awareness of that trauma, no talk about it, no nothing. So somebody could go through something horrific, but their family structure could be so great that perhaps it wasn't as traumatic as somebody who went through, say, a health trauma or family structure trauma, and there was no talking of it. And so for that child, it is heavy. It is a lot. So yeah, I love to destigmatize the word trauma. That is big, I think. There's a huge stigma of like, I don't want to, you know, put myself in that because that's not me. I don't want to take away from anybody else. It's not there. That trauma word is huge. It's huge. Are eczema flares an indication of a traumatized nervous system? In my opinion, Sohani, I would say absolutely. In homeopathy, they say the itch of the mind that can't stop, is like scratching too. So to me, nervous system and eczema is one and the same. When I see so many children with eczema, I myself had horrific eczema. When there's eczema, there's definitely an immune system and nervous system component to it. I would say that's a lot of it. There's a gut component too, but knowing what we know of the gut, gut is trauma, but the skin is directly correlated to me as nervous system. So absolutely, I would say absolutely. And to Carolyn's point, that destigmatized word of trauma, it doesn't have to be this horrific event. It could be like, I feel abandoned, you know? It could be like I felt rejected as a child, not nurtured, not seen, whatever it was. And so itching, you know, it takes away that disassociated pain. It numbed out a child when you scratch. So it could be anything like that. So that's a great question. Any other questions? Anything else that you wanted to ask before we sign off for today, this Monday? That was a great session, you guys. I loved it. I loved all the questions and the feedback. It was really great. I would suggest, if you can still do the hot cold showers throughout the summer even, that would be great. And even by September, maybe it's more of a habit then, and you can carry through fall. Don't think ahead to winter, just take it day by day by day, and even second by second in the shower. So if you're worrying about it all day like I used to, just get into the shower. That is your goal, and then decide yes that you're gonna do it. But me worrying about it all day, that was indicative of my trauma state. Like if something was on my mind, I would think about it all day before the event was done, or until I got to that place or whatever I had scheduled. And that's very common for people. If they have an appointment on Wednesday, they'll start to think about it on Monday, and their nervous system isn't relaxed until they get everything out of the way, and they go to that simple appointment on Monday or Wednesday. that is a nervous system that is just like cannot release. So yes, this is a big thing. And can it be treated? Yes, it's absolutely the unwinding of the nervous system to get to just our original blueprint, which just took away the stories and life came as it is and we accepted. I hope that helps. Thank you, everyone. This was an awesome session. I love it. Again, we went to an hour, which is okay by me. But yeah, so we went way over, which is fine by me. But I will be on again in July, and our next theme of the month is going to be hormones. So check in for that. I think I'm doing one called Fertile Grounds about fertility, and another one called Womb Wisdom. So just all things womb, which is super magical. So check out that. All right. Ongoing journey for sure. Yes. To unravel this nervous system and to get from here to here. I'll try to find that quote, but it's from that philosopher Lao Tzu, who says that the longest journey we'll ever take is the 14 inches from here to here. And that's 1,000,000% true. Thank you, everyone. Have an awesome start to your week, and we'll see you soon.